All right, let me tell you about a plant that breaks every rule you've ever been taught about food production. This thing doubles in size every 48 hours. Not in some fancy laboratory with perfect conditions and scientists in white coats monitoring every variable. No, this happens in any container of still water you can find. A puddle, a bucket, a kiddie pool on your apartment balcony. You start with a handful, and 2 days later, you have 2 handfuls. 4 days in, you've got 4 times what you started with. By day 7, you could fill a bathtub. By day 30, you're looking at a literal ton of biomass. This is not some wild exaggeration or internet myth. This is just mathematics playing out in real time. Exponential growth so aggressive that scientists have officially labeled it the fastest growing plant on the entire planet. But here's the thing that really got my attention, and honestly, it should get yours too. Speed isn't even the impressive part. This plant contains 45% protein by dry weight. For context, eggs sit at about 12%, beef comes in around 26%, and chicken maxes out at 31%. This little green powerhouse beats every single one of them, and we're not talking about some incomplete plant protein that you need to combine with rice or beans to make it useful. This is complete protein with all 9 essential amino acids in exactly the ratios your body actually needs. If you're finding this as wild as I did, smash that like button and subscribe, because we're just getting started, and trust me, this story goes places you won't believe. So what exactly is this miracle plant that sounds too good to be true? Scientists call it lemna, but you probably know it by a different name. Duckweed. That green film coating the surface of ponds and ditches that you've been trained your whole life to find absolutely disgusting. That stuff you've walked past 1,000 times thinking it was just pond scum, some kind of algae mess that needed to be cleaned up. Yeah, that's not pond scum at all. That's actually the most efficient protein production system ever discovered by human beings, just sitting there in nature, waiting for someone to pay attention. Now here's where my mind really started to spin. 1 acre of duckweed produces 10 times more protein than 1 acre of soybeans, 20 times more protein than an acre of corn. It generates food faster than any agricultural system humans have ever created in our entire history of farming. And it does something else, something that honestly should have made this the most valuable crop on planet Earth. It purifies water while it grows. Duckweed absorbs nitrogen, phosphorus, even heavy metals. It takes that toxic agricultural runoff that normally poisons our rivers and lakes and converts it directly into edible protein. The plant literally cleans your water and feeds you simultaneously. I had to read that fact 3 times before it sunk in, because it sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, not reality. Think about what we're looking at here. A plant that grows virtually anywhere with almost nothing required. No soil, no fertilizer, no tractors, no irrigation systems, no pesticides, no expensive equipment. Just water and sunlight producing complete protein faster than anything else in agricultural history, while filtering pollutants as a bonus feature. This should be growing in every backyard in America, every rooftop garden, every community plot, every refugee camp where people are struggling to survive, every food desert where families can't access affordable nutrition. Everywhere hunger exists, this plant could exist too, solving the problem for practically nothing. Instead, it's illegal to cultivate in most of the developed world. They call it invasive. They label it a nuisance species. They treat it like something dangerous that needs to be eradicated at all costs. Governments have spent billions making absolutely sure you never learn what this plant actually is or what it can do. But here's the fascinating part of this whole story. Not everyone forgot. The people of Southeast Asia have known about duckweed for thousands of years. In Thailand, they call it phum. In Myanmar, it's yakain. Across Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, communities have been harvesting this plant from rice paddies for longer than written records even exist. And this wasn't some desperate famine food that people only ate when they were starving. This was a legitimate staple protein source for civilizations that thrived for thousands of years. The oldest documented references show up in Chinese agricultural texts from around 200 BCE. Ancient farmers noticed something interesting happening around their ponds. Water with duckweed produced healthier fish. Rice paddies growing duckweed alongside the crops needed way less fertilizer. Livestock that ate harvested duckweed grew faster and stronger than animals fed traditional diets. These early agriculturalists didn't understand nitrogen cycles or protein synthesis on a scientific level, but they absolutely understood results. The practice spread across Asia and evolved into incredibly sophisticated integrated systems. Rice paddies would grow duckweed on the surface while fish lived underneath, eating any excess. Pigs and chickens fed on duckweed harvested from the edges. Animal waste fertilized the water, and the duckweed cleaned it right back up again. Zero external inputs required. Complete nutritional cycles. Food systems that literally sustained themselves for centuries without anyone buying anything. When European explorers finally reached Southeast Asia, they documented these practices with complete astonishment. A Portuguese missionary wrote in 1590 about villages that somehow grew meat without any pastures. He couldn't wrap his head around how protein just appeared from green water. The knowledge existed. The systems worked beautifully. Millions of people depended on them for their survival and prosperity. Then colonialism showed up and changed everything. European agricultural models didn't include pond cultivation. They had no category for integrated aquatic systems. What they understood was land ownership, monoculture cash crops, and purchased inputs that generated profits for colonial powers. The administration systematically dismantled traditional systems. They drained wetlands. They prioritized rice exports over nutritional diversity for local populations. They officially classified duckweed cultivation as primitive and backwards. Within just 2 generations, knowledge that had sustained entire civilizations started disappearing from human memory, but not everywhere. In Bangladesh, the poorest communities kept growing it because they simply had no other choice. In rural Myanmar, families quietly maintained their backyard ponds. In the Mekong Delta, elderly farmers remembered the old ways and passed them down. The knowledge survived in the margins, among people too poor to abandon what actually worked, in communities too remote for agricultural modernization to reach and destroy. They kept growing the fastest protein source on Earth, while the rest of the world learned to call it a worthless weed. Now fast forward to 1985, when NASA rediscovered what peasant farmers had known for millennia. They were searching for the perfect space crop, something that could sustain astronauts on long missions to Mars and beyond. The requirements were extreme. The plant needed to grow incredibly fast in tiny confined spaces, produce complete nutrition, recycle wastewater, and generate oxygen for breathing. Duckweed checked every single box. The research published in Advances in Space Research shocked even the scientists who conducted it. Protein content at 45% dry weight, doubling time of just 48 hours, water purification removing up to 99% of nitrogen. Nothing else even came close to competing. Follow-up studies at NASA's Kennedy Space Center crunched the numbers on yield potential, and what they found was absolutely staggering. 1 hectare of duckweed surface could theoretically produce 140 tons of dry protein per year. Compare that to soybeans, which produce less than 1 ton per hectare annually. That's 140 times more efficient. Researchers at Rutgers University analyzed the amino acid profile in 2009 and confirmed that duckweed protein matched FAO requirements for human nutrition almost perfectly. German researchers at the University of Jena went even further, feeding duckweed to human subjects in controlled trials. Digestibility came in at 93%. Bioavailability was comparable to egg protein. Taste was mild and slightly nutty. No adverse effects whatsoever. Their conclusion was direct and unambiguous. Duckweed is completely suitable for direct human consumption. Then the World Bank funded a massive comprehensive review in 2019, analyzing 17 years of duckweed studies from 12 different countries. Their 40-page conclusion could honestly be summarized in a single sentence. Duckweed is the most resource-efficient protein source available to humanity. The science was completely settled. The data was overwhelming and undeniable. The implications were genuinely revolutionary for global food security. So why isn't this plant on every table? Why can't you find it in any grocery store? Why have most people never even heard of it? Here's where things get uncomfortable. In the United States, duckweed is officially classified as an aquatic nuisance species in 37 states. Cultivating it requires special permits and jumping through bureaucratic hoops. Transporting it across state lines can result in serious fines. In some places, it's literally illegal to possess. The official justification is ecological protection because, yes, duckweed does spread rapidly and can cover ponds and potentially disrupt ecosystems. But here's what drives me crazy about that reasoning. The exact same thing is true of every successful crop in human history. Wheat spreads aggressively wherever it grows. Corn outcompetes native plants without mercy. Soybeans require destroying massive natural habitats before you can even plant them. Industrial agriculture has converted over 1 billion acres of wilderness into monoculture farmland, and nobody banned any of those crops. But duckweed is different, isn't it? Duckweed doesn't require purchased seeds. It doesn't require purchased fertilizer or pesticides. It doesn't require expensive equipment or complex infrastructure. You can literally start a duckweed farm with a plastic container and a handful of plants scooped from any pond. And that right there is the real problem. The global animal feed industry generates $400 billion every single year. Soy protein dominates that market. Corn supplements it. Both require massive infrastructure investments. Both require purchasing seeds annually. Both require continuous chemical inputs. Duckweed requires absolutely none of that. It costs almost nothing to produce and grows faster than supply chains can even justify existing. It makes the entire feed industry business model completely obsolete overnight. The same pattern applies to human protein supplements. Whey protein alone represents a $20 billion market. All those protein powders and bars and shakes depend on expensive processing and premium branding to justify their prices. Duckweed powder would cost less to produce than the packaging it comes in, so environmental regulations provide extremely convenient cover for protecting those profit margins. Classifying duckweed as invasive makes commercial cultivation nearly impossible. The handful of startups brave enough to try entering this market face years of regulatory review before they can sell a single product. Meanwhile, the plant that could genuinely solve global protein shortages grows wild on every pond in America, officially classified as a dangerous nuisance and legally prohibited from commercial development. But here's what the regulations don't tell you, and this is the part that changes everything. Those restrictions apply to commercial operations and natural waterways. They do not apply to closed containers on private property. A plastic tub in your backyard isn't a regulated waterway. A stock tank on your patio isn't a commercial operation. A kiddie pool on your balcony isn't subject to aquatic nuisance laws. You can grow duckweed legally almost anywhere for less than $20 in startup costs. One container, some water, a handful of starter plants. That's the entire investment, and within 2 weeks, you'll have more than you know what to do with. People are already doing this everywhere. Homesteaders in Florida grow duckweed to feed tilapia that feed their families year-round. Urban farmers in Detroit use it to supplement chicken feed and cut their costs in half. Permaculture operations across the developing world have integrated duckweed into completely sustainable, closed-loop food systems. The knowledge is spreading despite the regulations, despite zero commercial support, despite what honestly looks like deliberate suppression. Because once you see the math, you cannot unsee it. 45% complete protein that doubles every 2 days with zero inputs required. This isn't a supplement or a curiosity. This is a genuine revolution sitting in a plastic container. The industrial food system has taught you that protein is expensive and complicated, that food requires massive inputs and infrastructure, that you must remain dependent on supply chains completely outside your control. Duckweed tells a completely different story. It speaks of abundance without permission, protein without corporations, food sovereignty in a container you already own. Every pond already contains it. Every warm water surface can grow it. The infrastructure exists everywhere, just waiting to be activated. The only barrier standing between you and free protein forever is knowledge. Now you have it. Drop a comment below telling me whether you're going to try growing this yourself, and definitely subscribe if you want more content exposing the foods and technologies they'd rather you never discovered. The most efficient protein source on Earth is growing in ditches right now, while corporations tell you to keep buying their expensive products. Maybe it's time to stop asking permission and start growing your own future.